Hi, I'm David Miller. Welcome to my channel, Legend Shadows. And today, we're taking a look at the movie Scream 7. Can you step into the same bloody river 7 times, not just without drowning in self-repetition, but while making the viewer nervously look over their shoulder at the front door again? The Scream franchise has survived perhaps the most turbulent period in its history over the last couple of years. Cast changes, high-profile departures, the return of legends, and finally, a change of director. And here we are. Did the creators manage to put this puzzle back together, or are we looking at a mere attempt to squeeze the last juices out of a cult mask? I'll say it right now. This is a movie that surprisingly manages to be both an apology to the old-school fans and a harsh, uncompromising statement on the nature of modern sequels. But does it work as a single mechanism? Let's figure it out. To start, some quick context so we're all on the same wave. Scream 7 is a return to roots in the most literal sense. None other than Kevin Williamson took the director's chair, the man whose screenplay back in 1996 actually launched this flywheel of meta-irony and slasher deconstruction. The producers from Project X Entertainment, including James Vanderbilt and William Sherrick, made perhaps the only right bet in this situation. They returned the focus to the Scream Queen Sidney Prescott. The film hits U.S. screens tentatively in February 2026. Dates may vary slightly by region. And it is positioned not just as another installment, but as the grand finale of a specific era. It's a classic whodunit with a knife, where everyone is under suspicion, and the killer's motivation, as always, lies in deep grudges or twisted pop culture logic. The main roles, besides the indispensable Neve Campbell, are played by Courtney Cox and Patrick Dempsey, whose return became a real gift for those who remember the third film. Why did I decide to make this review right now, with such an emphasis on details? Honestly, I went to the press screening with a heavy heart. After all the scandals and news about rewrites, it seemed the project was doomed to become a Frankenstein, stitched together from patches of different ideas. I sat in the theater expecting to see a disaster, but when the lights went down and that specific phone ring rang out, I caught myself thinking that I missed it. I missed this specific anxiety that only Scream knows how to generate. This review for me is an attempt to understand how a franchise that is almost 30 years old manages to remain relevant when the rules of the game in horror have changed a dozen times already. This isn't just a review of a new release. It's a conversation about why we love to be scared and why it is so important for us to see familiar faces surviving in hell. Now about the plot, and I promise to be as careful as possible not to spoil the pleasure for you. We meet Sidney Prescott several years after the events we only heard about in passing in the last installment. She has built a life full of love and, more importantly, safety. She isn't running anymore. But, as often happens in the world of Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson, the past has a habit of kicking the door in. A new series of murders begins not in Woodsboro and not in New York, but hits the most vulnerable point. The feeling that it's all over. The main conflict here is built not just on survival. It's a story about legacy. The killer, or killers, doesn't just want fame. They want to rewrite history, claiming that the original must always be destroyed to make room for the new. On the line for Sidney now is not only her life, but the lives of her loved ones. And it is this maternal instinct, mixed with the cold rage of a survival veteran, that becomes the emotional anchor of the film. If before we looked at a frightened girl, now before us stands a warrior who just wants to be left alone. The concept might seem familiar, but the devil lies in exactly how Ghostface issues this challenge. The film handles the task of explaining why now and why Sidney perfectly, without sliding into absurd explanations like the killer was the neighbor's second cousin. My main thesis on Scream 7 sounds like this. This is, perhaps, the most mature and psychologically calibrated film of the series since the first part. If the sixth part was an adrenaline ride in the big city, The seventh is a tense thriller in a confined space, where suspense prevails over action. The best thing about the film is its respect for the viewer's intelligence and for its characters. However, this is exactly what might become a stumbling block. The film requires you to know the context, to love these heroes, and to be ready to accept a more measured, almost Hitchcockian pacing, which sometimes sacrifices dynamics for the sake of atmosphere. Let's dive deeper into the analysis, starting with the script and pacing. You can feel Williamson's hand. The dialogue has become sharper, more cynical. Yet there is less teenage slang, which is logical given the age of the main characters. The film doesn't rush forward headlong. The first third of the picture is pure suspense, a slow build-up where you know the killer is somewhere nearby, but the director is in no hurry to jump out from around the corner with a loud noise. It is a confident leading of the viewer by the hand into a dark room. The tempo accelerates in the second act, turning into that very bloodbath we expect, but the transitions are made very smoothly. There is no feeling that the film is falling apart or stalling. The script structure here is a classic three-act monolith, sturdy and reliable. The characters are the heart of the film. Neve Campbell. What can you say? She doesn't play Sydney. She is Sydney. In her eyes, you read the fatigue of a person who has seen too much evil, but at the same time, there isn't a drop of defeatism in her. Her interaction with Gale Weathers, Courtney Cox, has reached a new level. Their relationship has outgrown the friendship-enmity stage. Now it is a deep, almost wordless understanding of two soldiers who have been through the same war. Gale is shown here as more vulnerable than usual, which adds unexpected depth to her arc. As for the new faces, they are there, and they perform their functions worthily, but the script makes it clear. This is the old guard's show. The themes the film raises resonate with reality. The tone of the picture balances between grim seriousness and signature meta-humor, but the scales tip toward the former. Jokes here are a defense mechanism, not a way to diffuse the situation. You won't be laughing out loud, but there will be plenty of nervous chuckles. This saves the film from turning into a parody of itself. Williamson's directing differs from the style of Radio Silence, the directors of the previous two parts. It is more classic, cinematic. Less shaky cam, more static shots, play of shadows, and frame geometry. The attack scene in the house, I won't say whose, is staged with such mastery of spatial work that you want to applaud. The editing isn't choppy. It allows you to examine details, which only amplifies the horror of what is happening. The technical side is top-notch. The cinematography moves away from the sterile digital look toward a warmer but unsettling color grading, reminiscent of late 90s films but in modern resolution. Sound is a separate character. Floor creaks, phone calls, heavy breathing in the mask. The sound designers did titanic work. The music by Marco Beltrami, if he returned, or someone who perfectly emulates his style, hits on nostalgia but adds new industrial notes. If we compare, this film is closer in spirit to the first Scream and, perhaps, to Halloween 2018. It is a story about trauma and meeting evil face to face without unnecessary tinsel. Now let's move on to my favorite audience test. How will different people perceive this film? Fans who have been with the franchise since the 90s will be delighted. This is a love letter specifically to them. You will see references that only those who wore their VHS tapes down to holes will understand. Teenagers and Zoomers who came to the franchise thanks to Jenna Ortega and the sixth part might feel a bit uncomfortable. There is less TikTok clip pacing, less youth slasher drive, and more adult drama. This doesn't mean they will be bored, but perhaps the entry threshold will be slightly higher. Of course, it wasn't without weak spots. Let's be honest, the franchise has still become a hostage to its own formula. No matter how virtuoso Williamson shuffles the cards, we are still playing with the same deck. The middle of the film sags a bit in dynamics. There are a couple of dialogue scenes that seem slightly dragged out and serve only for exposition. Furthermore, Ghostface's motivation, while thematically justified, might seem a bit far-fetched or, let's say, too meta to some viewers. Sometimes you want the killer to just be a psychopath, without a complex philosophical base regarding the state of cinema. Summing up, I recommend Scream 7 for viewing. I cautiously recommend it to those expecting non-stop action, and I strongly recommend it to those who love smart slashers and the character of Sidney Prescott. It is a worthy, solid movie that respects its legacy and doesn't try to be something it isn't. The creators managed to walk on thin ice and not fall through. Thank you for spending this time with me. I really hope this review helped you decide whether it's worth spending money on a ticket. Be sure to write in the comments who your favorite Ghostface is in the entire history of the franchise and how you feel about Sidney's return. Don't forget to subscribe to Legend Shadows and hit the bell so you don't miss reviews of other horror new releases. See you in the darkness of the cinema hall, friends.